But you know, that's a good thing. And they're here. That's a good thing.
Excuse me, Mr. Cameraman.
Yes, I remember.
I promise to be. I will Order! We're gonna start semifinals. Right. All debaters here. Okay, welcome to the semifinal of IDU Forum 2013. Someone judges us sitting in the middle of the room, so please be quiet, please. Okay, first of all, I would like to introduce honorable judges in the semifinal. I am from Romania. Sharon from the United States. Scott from USA. Josh from USA. Bella from Slovenia. Morgan from Canada. And I'm Mitsushi from Japan. Secondly, let me introduce honorable debaters for the semi-final. On the affirmative side, we have Pakistan B. On the negative side, we have have Team Estonia. The motion for semi-final is that Edward Snowden was right to blow the whistle. Now, without further ado, I would like to call upon the first speaker. Please deliver the speech within 6 minutes. Here.
When Edward Snowden signed a contract with Booz Allen Hamilton, saying that he would not reveal their secrets, he had no possible way of knowing that the United States, the land of the free, the country that purports an image of being the freest, the nicest country in the world, was carrying out a sophisticated, in fact the most sophisticated surveillance program in the history of the world. He had no idea that he was going to come up against governmental tyranny such as never been seen by the world before. Your government does not give you rights. You have those rights. And it is for your government to respect them. Something that we feel has not been happening. That said, we feel that for something to be right, putting into the context of this debate, for something to be right, when you sign a contract, but you find something unethical, more than that, something that's absolutely criminal in any respect that you may look at it, we feel that that is right, that revealing that information is right, that people have a right to have that information, and we feel that that is enough ground, that is more than enough ground for Edward Snowden to have blown the whistle. That said, we'll be talking to you about two things. First of all, we feel like the government can't take away rights just because it feels it is more convenient or more simple for it to do so. And so it can politically glorify itself and say, well, we are tracking terrorism or something. Second of all, we feel that the harms of the profiling that they're carrying out are simply uncountable. Now, talking to you about the first argument. Well, governments are supposed to be accountable to your people, right? But that responsibility in the US doesn't end at the first Tuesday of November every 4 years. That is where it begins. Your government cannot simply say that we've elected our government, now for the next 4 years it can do whatever it wants because we're going to trust them and be nice to them to not do such things. Especially when you know that they do such things. People's rights, I've already told you, exist because they're people, and it is for governments to facilitate them, not cut them out just because it's easier. Now, Patriot Act was passed in 2002 in the wake of the war of terrorism. And it said that you can warrantlessly surveil people who are suspicious. We feel that this is absolutely different from any provision in the Patriot Act, because that's what it said, people who are suspicious. What has this act been doing? What has the NSA's surveillance program been doing? When you put in your Xcode key, you can find out more about the behavior of people on the internet, who they're calling, who they're emailing, than you probably know about yourself. Why is that wrong? Because people, A, have privacy, and B, because you aren't just saying that we suspect these people or that these people are doing something wrong. You don't know that they're doing something wrong. Everybody in the United States here is a suspect. Most of the people outside the United States are suspects. What are you doing? Can you just decide that, well, we think that that guy in the US, just that guy, might be a suspect? That's not fair. What's more, you're not just doing it in the US, even if we were to accept that this is somehow morally, legally, ethically okay, which it absolutely is not. What right does the United States have to do does the United States have to do this to the rest of the people of the world whom they're also surveilling simply because their traffic runs through United States servers? We do not understand, and we simply can't stand for it. In the United States, you can't arrest somebody without a warrant. You can't tap their phones without a warrant. You can't enter their homes without a warrant. You can't even digitally track their cars without a warrant. But you can do this? Absolutely not. We don't feel that in any case can ever be a justification for what was done by the NSA. And more than that, even if you were to say that it's okay, we believe that certain rights are absolute. You can't just sign them off and say that, well, because we're United States citizens, we're okay with this. There are certain things that even if you're okay with being surveilled and made into a robot, having a profile made out of yourself, that is ridiculously inaccurate. That doesn't make it right. That said, let's talk to you about how it is ridiculously inaccurate. Imagine this. I'm a Pakistani. I go to college in the US. I probably call my family at home, odd hours of the night, time difference. I'm a college student. I'm not free all the time. I probably go check information about Pakistani current affairs. It's my country. I would legitimately want to know. Now what happens? I'm probably a terrorist because all of these have been red flagged by the NSA's surveillance program. I'm just somebody who's interested in debating and knowing what's going on in the world. But my behavior to the computer that the NSA has set up to surveil real people probably thinks I'm a terrorist. Next step, send me to Guantanamo, because that is exactly what you are doing. And what's more, terrorists have already been operating under the assumption after the Patriot Act that they are being surveilled. So who are you, I mean, even if you were to somehow, I don't even understand how you can believe that it's okay, even if you did, what are you achieving with this policy? Because these people have already been using code words, using encrypted emails, things that the NSA isn't so well suited to track. Finally, let me ask you something. You have the war on terrorism because you feel that there are some things that certain people simply cannot do. Why then is the United States government, the government of the free, allowed to do them? Thank you.
I could use your prep time.
Yes.
Okay.
Keep it down.
One minute task.
Some simple questions for the start, right? So is our right to privacy absolute?
We feel that the rights of the people, whether
Yes or
they're
no?
absolute or not. How are you saying that a government can surveil, what, 6 billion people and
All
say
right,
that the right to
I'll
privacy is
ask
not
you another
absolute?
question. Is the right to know absolute? Like, for example, should we have the right to know our military defense strategy?
Is this debate really about an absolute right? Do we not have the right
You
to
said
keep
that
our
some rights
email
are
or our cell phone
absolute.
calls?
You in your speech said that some rights are absolute. Which
I didn't
rights?
say some rights are absolute. I just don't see how this debate is about absolute rights. This debate is about the fact that you have no rights.
All right. Does the state have a responsibility to protect its own people?
We don't see how you're protecting your people. We've already told you that terrorists aren't being targeted by this policy because more often than not.
Okay, so you also said that, it has to be criminal for us to actually persecute it. So if it was legal in a country, that would be okay.
Excuse me?
You said that
No,
it has
I've
to be
told you that there are certain things that even if people consent to, you can't do. Such as the fact that if people want to die, you don't let them commit suicide.
And how does exactly it relate to privacy?
What we're saying is that there are certain rights that are so important that you can't let people sign them off even if they want to sign them off.
Okay.
Included in them
Okay, yeah.
is the right to basic privacy.
So when Edward Snowden says that, everybody is being listened to, that everybody's phone calls are tapped, was he or was he not over-exaggerating?
Actually, he wasn't over-exaggerating. That's the
All
point.
right,
The
thanks.
entire United States.
If you're like an average person and you're one of the people who's actually, you know, paranoid about the whole system, right? Then does it actually relate to you as a person, even though you're really afraid of your government after what Snowden did?
Excuse me?
After what Snowden did, there was a lot of
Absolutely,
paranoia.
it relates to me. Just because I'm a certain way, maybe I'm a Pakistani immigrant, maybe I'm a Muslim, I can be turned into a terrorist by a government that is paranoid. Absolutely, it relates to average people.
Okay, if there is no reasonable doubt, will the government...
But that's the point. The system is so inaccurate that reasonable doubt becomes unreasonable to the point of insanity.
Okay, do you really think that if you do not actually, like, you know, call into some terrorists, I don't know, like, you know, hotspots, will they actually, like, start...
What terrorist hotspot? Is Pakistan a terrorist hotspot? And justify, if I just call home, I will then become a terrorist. What terrorist hotspot are you talking about?
Do you really think that, you know, the government of the United States classifies your mother's phone number as a terrorist?
That's the point. That's what the system is doing. It's not looking for real data. All it's saying is if you call Pakistan at wrong hours in the night, if you have the wrong language used in your emails, you're probably a terrorist.
All right, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we on the side of the opposition believe that what Snowden did was harmful for all of us. But the biggest problem is that he is considered a hero for it. In order to prove that, I will first of all bring you 5 points of rebuttal, and then I'm going to talk about our own arguments. First of all, I'm going to talk about giving precedent, and secondly, I'm going to talk to you about fear. Then I'm moving on to the rebuttal. The first thing that was said on the side of the proposition, that when we sign a contract, everything criminal should be just revealed. But we think that this is actually not a criminal thing. We can reveal stuff when we're talking about actual real crimes. This surveilling people, this is not a real crime. This is done all the time anyway. This has been done, and the people are already kind of okay with the fact that, oh, I'm being surveyed, for example, in airports, because we want to be defended. We want to give away some of our privacy so that we can feel safe. And this is exactly the same case. This next thing that they said, that the government cannot do anything, that people's rights exist. Oh yeah, we do agree that people have rights, but their rights are not absolute. As I just said, we need to give away some of our privacy. We need to give it away just so that we can feel safe, because we give it away already. As I said, we give it away at an airport. As I said, we're already giving away our privacy in many other cases because we want to feel safe. And I'm going to talk to you later about how the amount of privacy we're giving away is actually really marginal, and how Snowden over-exaggerated that. And then they said that NSA surveys everything and everyone. Oh no, they do not. This is exactly how we think this is the problem. That Snowden over-exaggerated the amount of infringement of privacy the NSA did. This is not actually the case. The NSA surveys certain people who have already been sort of suspicious, and they survey these phone numbers. They don't even know what person that is. And they listen to those, and if they find some sort of a suspicious word, then they start to further investigate into that. Average people, the majority of people, are not even touched by this, but they think they are because Snowden said that they are, and now they're in fear. I'm going to talk about that later more thoroughly. And then the next thing that they said, the USA has no right to survey people in other countries. Again, we think that they do. We think that they do have the right to do that in order to guarantee the safety of their own people. Because how the NSA worked, or what was the reason the NSA worked, so they can track terrorists, right? So they can defend or preemptively defend their people from sort of attacks, from crime, and so forth. Now, and it worked because nobody knew that they were tracked. The terrorists didn't know that they were tracked, so they could very easily use the phones and use them to do their plots, and it worked for the NSA to catch them. But now the terrorists don't know. But now the terrorists do know that they're tracked. Now the terrorists do know to avoid phone calls, which means that now we cannot catch them that easily. That now they're using more sophisticated methods of communication. And this is actually what we are talking about. This is what the NSA does. It protects us from terrorists, and we willingly give away some of our privacy anyway, and we are gladly willing to give away some of our privacy so that we will not be killed. And now, moving on to their final point of rebuttal. They said that it is easy to catch someone, and it is easy to misinterpret somebody's phone call to Pakistan to their mother as being terrorists. Oh, come on, that's just not true. The NSA, if there's in another language, they're going to translate it. If they find out that you're talking to your mother, you're not going to put you in Guantanamo. If they track you for a long time and see that you're talking about making bombs, and then they're going to investigate you further, they're going to find out is it true, and only in the last case, only if they're absolutely sure that you are actually a terrorist, only then something is going to happen. They're not going to be that careless to put everybody in Guantanamo just because they called Pakistan. Come on, let's be reasonable here. We think like generally, the Proposition T has been very absolute about everything. This case is actually a lot more subtle than they think. And then moving on to our own arguments. First of all, giving precedent. We think that we and the media perceive Snowden as being a hero for what he did. We perceive him that he was the good guy for enclosing these secrets, and therefore we actually love to see more of that happening. Therefore, we're justifying and incentivizing disclosure of state secrets furthermore, because people saw that Snowden was a hero, and people saw that maybe I'll be a hero as well if I do the same thing. And we think that this is actually bad, because in order for the state system to work, some secrets need to be kept. Because, for example, we don't disclose troop movements if we're having a war, because we don't want the other side to know that. We need to keep tracking terrorists away from the terrorists of knowing that, because if they know, they're just going to hide. Well, that's kind of obvious. So we think that if you are a government worker, and if you gave a vow to not disclose those secrets, you have to keep that vow, because if you don't, the system cannot work if everybody is not keeping those vows. And we're actually saying that it is okay to not keep those vows, and furthermore, we're saying that if you don't keep those vows, we actually think that you're going to be a hero. And now I'm going to talk to you about fear. The thing is, not everyone is listened to, but because Snowden over-exaggerated the amount of tracking the NSA did, everybody thinks that they're being targeted. Even the most average person thinks that the NSA is targeting them and thinks that the government is listening to him. Nobody actually cares what the average person does. The NSA does not track them, but they think they do, and they feel that their privacy is being infringed. They feel afraid, and they feel paranoid. They feel that their government is oppressing them, even though that is actually not the case. That's what Snowden did. Snowden made America fear their own government, and that is actually terrible, because now the Americans hate the USA, but they love Russia, for example, because Russia gave asylum to Snowden. So we're actually making the good guy the bad guy, and making Russia the good, lovely leader here who is helping Snowden and who is saving the world. This is wrong. Thank you.
1 minute passed.
Emma Danny.
Man, do you think it's justified for the state to carry out such a high level of surveillance without telling the people?
Again, as I said, the level of surveillance is actually not that high, and it's actually
Okay,
good that they're not doing it.
So you're saying the level of surveillance is not that high. If it's such a trivial problem, why did the United States government have to hide it from the people for so long?
Because of what I explained to you. This level of surveillance is so small, and yet the world, and yet the people of America hate their government for doing that. Because they don't want
Man,
people
thank you.
to hate them.
So what you're saying is the United States government hid it from the people for kicks and they just want to laugh out of it. And now that the people know, and now the people feel that there is a problem, there is a possibility of them being, or there's pretty much a probability of them being suspected or being looked at, this is not a problem at all.
Can you repeat?
This is not a
question?
so you're saying this is a very trivial problem.
What is a trivial problem?
This whole surveillance that the NSA is carrying out is very trivial, it's nothing.
Yes.
Okay, nothing. Anyways, second question. Is it okay for the government, in fear of theft, to install mini cameras in every house in the United States?
You're implying that we're listening to everyone. They are not. They're listening to special people who are suspicious, and they're not.
Okay, ma'am. Suppose they are listening to people. Then is it justified for them to install mini cameras in every house in the United States?
And this parallel actually doesn't work because they're listening.
Man,
to-
it's
they're
my
listening-
responsibility to make it work. Just tell me. If suppose it does it, they are surveilling everybody. Is it justified for you to install mini cameras in every single house in the United States?
That's actually debatable, but well, let's say no for this sake.
So it's not. Alright, then why would you? Okay, thank you. Anyway. So another question. If you are surveilling everybody, would you then have the justification, which you never tackled by the way, to go ahead and have mini cameras in every house in the world?
Well, by this extended logic, yes, but this does not correlate with our problem at all.
So then the United States government having problems with countries all around the world for surveilling them with proper evidence, you're saying that's not a problem at all. Those other countries who are retaliating are just being crybabies.
They're not actually listening to the people, they're listening to photos.
Alright, thank you.
They don't
Thank you,
know
ma'am.
who
Thank
they're
you.
talking
Do you
to.
think terrorists are a threat?
A real threat, yes.
Do you think the war on terror has been fought for quite a long time?
Yes.
So don't you feel by now the terrorists actually know that the state might as well be carrying out certain actions?
Well, now they know that the world knows after Snowden and
Okay, tell me this. Do terrorists like caves?
caves.
You know, caves.
Well, probably they don't.
They don't. So they hide in them for fun. So they use warehouses for fun. So they use all of these precautionary methods for no reason whatsoever, and they have no idea the United States government could be carrying out these actions. So these actions which you are now, the United States government has been allegedly been taken to be carrying out is not for these terrorists, but its own people. So now it's a tyrannical government.
There are three contradictions that we came across in team opposition. Firstly, they said, well, surveillance is something that's trivial, so people do not have a problem with it, and then they compare it to state secrets. If surveillance is something that's so trivial, then why are people crying about it, and why are people so outraged about it in the first place? Simply because, ladies and gentlemen, people care about their rights, people care about their privacy, which was the second contradiction they had. They said people don't have a problem with privacy, ladies and gentlemen, people can give up their rights. No, ladies and gentlemen, privacy is something that is essential to the people, ladies and gentlemen, which is why people not only in the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, but all across the world are standing up, because they realize, ladies and gentlemen, that the tyranny of the government cannot be allowed to go on, because they realize that it is time, ladies and gentlemen, that they stand up and fight for their rights. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, they said, well, when we asked them, would you install cameras in every house? They said, no, ladies and gentlemen, that's going very far. So they understand, ladies and gentlemen, that there is something as going too far. So if we show to you that this surveillance is something that's going too far, they lose this debate. Now let's show to you that the NSA is actually going too far, ladies and gentlemen. You're not only surveilling terrorists, you have computers who are installed who are looking for keywords. So for example, if I send Azim a text which says Osama bin Laden, they will go mad after me, ladies and gentlemen, they will come after me. This is the kind of surveillance that we're talking about. They track your Gmail accounts, they track your Facebook accounts, they track your phone calls. Not just simple people, ladies and gentlemen, but every single person in the United States of America. So Edward Snowden was doing anything but exaggerating, ladies and gentlemen. He did not even give out all the details. Why? Because he realized, ladies and gentlemen, that giving out some of them would cause such an outrage. Why? Because people care about privacy in the first place. With that, now talk about what they did actually tackle. They said, well, ladies and gentlemen, this is not criminal. They said people consent, people give up privacy all the time. They gave the example of airports. In airports, you consent to giving up your privacy. This is not something that you consent to, ladies and gentlemen. This is something that the government, A, is not informing you about, and B, is forcing upon you, ladies and gentlemen. They said, well, it's something trivial and people don't care about privacy. We told them this. If this is something which is so very trivial in nature and people don't care about it, then why did the United States of government, why did the government of the United States not tell the people in the first place? Because people would have been okay with it, right? Because they don't care about privacy. Simply, ladies and gentlemen, they did not answer that. Thirdly, they said, well, rights are not, they said the US has the right to surveil other countries. So they're basically saying, ladies and gentlemen, that the United States of America is this tyrannical world global authority which has the right to go on in every country, install cameras in every house. Why? Simply because they can, simply because it's convenient, ladies and gentlemen, and then they said, well, we have benefits. We're picking up on terrorists. They think of terrorists, ladies and gentlemen, as these naive people who, people who don't know about surveillance, who are people who live in caves, who are people who don't know anything, ladies and gentlemen. For God's sakes, these are people who you have been fighting for 12 years and still have not been able to end. Why? Because they're people, ladies and gentlemen, who are aware that these things happen, who are aware and thus take countermeasures. The only people that are being affected by this, ladies and gentlemen, is your normal citizens, are your normal citizens. I said, ladies and gentlemen, then, we cannot tell this because, well, it will create fear in your society. Fear of your society, ladies and gentlemen, of the government, of a tyrannical government is good. When people fear Hosni Mubarak, ladies and gentlemen, it is something that's good, ladies and gentlemen. Why? Because they're being tyrannical, because they're respecting the rights of the people, ladies and gentlemen. And when people fear such governments, that is when they stand up and take an action against them. So are they against people standing up a government because it creates fear, because it creates paranoia? Then they said, well, we cannot set such a precedent because it paints Edward Snowden as a hero. Have you ever given some thought to why people think of Edward Snowden as a hero, ladies and gentlemen? The reason why people think of Edward Snowden as a hero and not as a villain is not because he broke some content. It's because, ladies and gentlemen, people realized that he was not doing something which was unethical, ladies and gentlemen. Right to protect, a right to consent to a criminal employee and hide information about a criminal employee is never as important, ladies and gentlemen, as rights and responsibilities that you have to your citizens, to your very people. Something, ladies and gentlemen, which team opposition properly opposition has disregarded from the very beginning. And they disregarded our entire arguments about harms that existed, ladies and gentlemen, about possible harms. We told you, if I go to college in the United States of America and I'm a Pakistani, I talk to my mother, I joke about Osama bin because he's my cousin, I have a cousin named Osama Khalid. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I visit sites like nuclear terrorism, nuclear war, terrorism, etc. because, well, I'm intrigued and I'm interested by them. Those systems that you have in place, ladies and gentlemen, will pick up on those words and will take action against me. The reason why we believe this is a problem, ladies and gentlemen, is because racial profiling is something that's not acceptable for us. And as it themselves says, governments are already paranoid and take action upon these things. So the point that we're trying to make is this. Can we allow the paranoia of the government, ladies and gentlemen, to simply take away all rights that people have? So the idea that we leave you with is this. A, our government's never supposed to be accountable, and B, can we compromise rights, ladies and gentlemen, simply because it's easy, it's convenient, and because we are driven. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So why are people not protesting against data mining?
You yourself said people are going up against it, and not only in the United States of America but in other countries. So what do you stand for? The people are protesting or the people are not protesting?
No. I asked you, why are people not protesting against data mining? The thing we had a motion about, you know, how companies like track their
I
movements.
think that's slightly different from knowing more about me than my friends do, because I would just be being stalker to the extent that it's not okay with.
Okay. So do you think that this surveillance is justified if the people knew about it?
If the people know about everything and the people consent to it, then yes. But that's the problem, no? People don't consent to it and you still do it.
Okay, but why? Let's assume that the government would publicly announce that they are surveilling people. What would be the point of surveilling people then?
The point of surveilling it then would be then you would then be surveilling on the basis of some sort of suspicion and not because your unfounded paranoia that you have within your mind.
But okay, how does this actually harm an average person?
Because it takes away any sort of rights that the people actually have. And who knows where the government is to stop. Now they're checking into our homes. Next day they might install cameras into our homes simply because there might be a potential theft.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
pass.
How much time is there left?
3 minutes.
Thanks. How much time do we have?
2 more minutes.
I'm going to bring you 4 points of rebuttal and then I'm going to proceed with our arguments of creating a precedent and fear. Very glad they have taken over our structure and very glad they have not extended their case very much. So let me begin with the rebuttal. First of all, they told us that we didn't react to justification. We did. Vicky's whole speech was about the fact that people want to be protected. After 9/11, we have given away our privacy in airports, online, with a very Patriot Act that has been in action for 10 years in the United States. We are okay with the infringement of privacy because we know that the threat to our security is more important, that we must be secure in our state where we live. And we know about it in the internet, in the airports. They cannot say that we haven't consented to it. Now, second of all, when they tell us about that terrorists are not naive, and we should tell people because then we wouldn't infringe their privacy. We cannot tell the people, ladies and gentlemen, because then the terrorists will also know. And if they're not naive, then we're going to have to master some other kind of technology to get attack over them. And we say that we don't want them to know because if they don't know it, then it's easier for us to track down actual terrorists, and that is a good thing because otherwise they will receive from the internet, from the phone calls, and they will go somewhere else, and it will be much more difficult to track them and much more to actually tackle terrorism. Now, thirdly, they told us about the fact that just like consenting to a contract or giving a vow is not overriding of the rights of the people, their privacy. We told you about state secrets. We told you about the fact that we don't give military data away because that is something that other countries can use. If we were in a perfect world where everybody were democratic, we wouldn't have to worry about that. But because there are states that do believe in jihad and that do believe that the West is bad and they do want to attack us, we must keep some stuff secret. And so we also must keep secret the surveillance because we're not surveying people that are just doing their regular acts. Now, coming to the last point about privacy, let's make it a rebuttal on privacy. Racial profile is very much debatable, but it's not relevant in this case. They cannot frame it that we're just targeting those Pakistanis that are interested in Al-Qaeda. We also take, for example, we're very quiet, okay, the United States sees an Estonian girl going to Al-Qaeda sites, sees an Estonian girl really interested in the terrorism, in the terrorism movement. They're also going to look at her and be suspicious about her. But if there is no grounds for the suspicion, then those people are not sent to Guantanamo. So we're very much reacting to their argument about the harms which do not exist. Now, moving on to our argument, first of all, about the precedent. We are talking about the precedent that it's okay to give away state secrets and therefore undermine state sustainability. That is the precedent we're creating. We're saying that you're a hero if you do that, and we say that it's a bad thing because people are really flag. You know, the media portrays me. I get very famous, and therefore there will be more people incentivized to do that. But it is not justified to do that because the state needs to function, the military needs to function, and also, you know, the whole defense strategy for those people that we're actually protecting needs to function. And we don't see that happening if we tell those people that we're infringing on your privacy very little. And we see that actually, now coming to the argument about fear, we're not infringing on their privacy that much. And the fear is created just because the media portrays, and because Edward Snowden actually told and exaggerated the fact that we're actually surveying everybody. No, we're not. What we're doing is we're listening to phone conversations. We don't know who's talking. We don't care if they're talking about arbitrary things. If they talk about something suspicious, then we have grounds to actually look into it. In that case, we might look who is the one calling. But we're not going into everybody's home, and they kind of make a slippery slope argument about cameras and putting it to everybody's houses because we say that we may be, you know, if we do monitor those people that we deem suspicious, then we might talk about putting cameras into their rooms, but we cannot talk about putting it into everybody's room, into the whole global sphere. So, and under the fear argument, what we want to tell you is that people themselves do not want to know about them being surveyed. Why do they don't want to know? They don't want to know because they don't want the terrorists to know. Because they see that the state in this way is protecting them. And the outrage that has come after Snowden has released it is because we have framed it that way. Because nobody's actually talking about it, that this is a war against terrorism that we're dealing with. Everybody sees it as somebody invading my privacy, which is actually is not. And if we don't portray it in the media, then there will be a lot of fuss. And there will be people who will be praising Russia for something, just because he's good enough to give Snowden asylum. And we don't think that is something we should be striving for. I'm very glad to oppose.
One minute past.
You said that the media has framed Edward Snowden as a hero. Why have they done that?
Because they're really profit-oriented, and because people really
How are they getting profit out of the media? Presumably,
I'm sorry, media actually works this way, that you do something that people like to read, something that's very...
So people want to find that Edward Snowden is doing something wrong.
Yes, but media is over-exaggerating because if it does something, if it tells you something extreme and radical, then there are more people interested to read it.
Don't you think that when the media lies, it loses credibility, especially proper
They
channels
don't have
like...
to lie, they can just frame it a little bit different.
What is your evidence for this happening?
What's evidence? For example, if we
No,
talk about...
specifically, Edward Snowden, when did this happen? One instance.
Well, the fact that the media is
Do you
talking
have
about...
a specific example?
No, I don't have a specific example, but I have a very,
Tell
very
me
strong
something.
logic.
When you go to a different country and stop in an airport, you consent to giving them your passport.
Yes, you do, but
Do
I
you
really doubt that I'm not
Do you
going
also
to.
consent to giving them your complete history of cell phone calls and your online surfing?
No, but there's still an
You don't,
infringement
right? So
on
there is
privacy.
there is
You're
a
going to
limit. There is a
monitor
limit
me.
to how much you can
No,
give
we're
someone.
talking about scanning and privacy.
Right. All right. Different question. Is there a slight, maybe more than slight difference between military data and my Facebook history?
Of course, they're different things, but
There's
the
a huge
principle is the
difference,
same.
right?
No, the principle is the same. It's still privacy.
So clearly, somehow, my Facebook data is important for the United States national security.
National
Thank
security
you.
doesn't
Tell
care
me.
about your Facebook
Tell me.
data, but it
Tell
does
me.
care about the
You
Facebook
s-
data of the terrorists. And
Tell
therefore,
me.
it has
You
to
said
have
that
the
if
access.
people were okay with it, surveillance would be okay, right?
Yeah.
For thousands of years, people were okay with slavery. Did that make slavery okay?
No, but it's not the case. You didn't prove us the
So you realize that
case.
there are certain things that can't be okay no matter what people can.
Yes, but this is not the case.
This is not the case, but you do realize it's okay.
That's the same way.
Tell me,
no right
what is enough suspicion to suspect something?
That is not for me to
Alright, and something, are you interested in the Al-Qaeda, what they are, who they do, why they do it? Because there is a natural curiosity to know about the war of terror considering it's such a large
sure,
part
I
of the
might be
world.
very well interested in it.
Should you be criminalized for it?
No, I shouldn't, but if they're going to look into me based on my interest and find out that I'm a high school student who's just interested in it.
But I'm a
then
high school
that's
student
enough.
who's a Pakistani, that makes me 10 times more likely to be a terrorist. Is it then okay in my case?
No, because they're still going to find out that you're not a terrorist.
How are they going to find that out?
Because if they're going to look at... You cannot say that they're going to imprison you just based on your Facebook profile. That is
Right,
very,
so
very
they need
big
this other
exaggeration.
evidence, right?
Yes.
How are they going to gather it?
They are going to, for example, look into you.
So people,
As they do with other suspicious criminals.
they're
in
going
any
to
kind
look
of crime.
into me. How? And even if they do look into me, how are you supposed to look into the background of a Pakistani student and find out that he's somehow a terrorist? And that also look into on basis of the fact that I know about the Al-Qaeda. Thank you.
Guys, this is not a forum of discussion. Okay? Yes. Two minutes left.
कि poor working conditions refer to a law that was in a point being always ethical is not
One minute left.
Guys, there's two teams in this room that are still in the tournament. Try and have a debate. If you want to have your own debate, could you go do it somewhere else, please? Thank you.
According to the negative today, the world's most sophisticated surveillance agency, the NSA, and its scandal, ladies and gentlemen, was one big media scandal which Edward Snowden used to get a free vacation in Ecuador. He did this, ladies and gentlemen, because there was no motive behind it, because by the end of it, there was no problem surrounding it, and they had A, no evidence for it, and B, multiple contradictions in their speeches showing to us how exactly there was a problem, how he didn't lie, and how the people retaliating shows you how exactly by the end of the day this wasn't one big headline, this wasn't one big fallacy, this wasn't actually the United States government spying on your people. Let's talk about spying on your people. Did they ever justify it? No. They always told you there are certain lengths that you can go to, and beyond them, game over. That is exactly what we will show to you in this debate, how we win on those grounds. So there are four main issues in this debate. Firstly, can the government take away rights of its people over precaution? Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, was Edward Snowden exaggerating? Thirdly, is it okay to break contracts with agencies in critical matters? And lastly, is this the better way to crack down on terrorists? So first things first, let's talk to you about, can the government take away rights of its people over precaution? Here's what we told you, ladies. The Patriot Act, which we stated, and the second speaker finally refuted, ladies and gentlemen, it states that you may go ahead and carry out surveillance under suspicion. Not that under suspicion of a certain person, ladies and gentlemen, and clear suspicion with relative, backing of it. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have to prove to you how this suspicion is flawed. So there are two main reasons for it. Firstly, the demographics, ladies and gentlemen. We talked to you how if you're a Muslim or a debater or a college student, or for that matter even Estonian, ladies and gentlemen, they might as well look into you, they might as well look into whatever you're saying, and they will surveil you. Is that justified? No, because by the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, these things, they work on assumptions, which bring me to a second clarification of why this is not justified. Because these are unclear systems. We talked about the systems, ladies and gentlemen, how exactly if you say on the phone, I'm now going to drop the bomb on this party, they would probably think you are a terrorist, ladies and gentlemen, and that is not good enough or justification for you to infringe on the people's right to privacy, on their right to actually have some space from the government, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, we talked to you how exactly how the act is in itself unjustified, and secondly how they're using it in the wrong way either. So the Patriot Act, ladies and gentlemen, completely falls to us how they're misusing it and is an unjustified act. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, they consider that they will not install cameras in houses just because of a theft, ladies and gentlemen, or for that matter enemies. So checking phones, checking emails, and going through your own personal databases, ladies and gentlemen, is not going too far. That is everything short of installing a complete camera and looking after whatever you do for the rest of your life, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that is a very grave of a matter. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, we told you how exactly will the state be unstable due to this. They talked about fear and how that's bad. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're saying is that fear of the government is there only because the government has wronged. Only because the government in the first place has carried out certain acts which are not justified. So the people retaliating, ladies and gentlemen, actually shows you that this is an unjustified act because legitimacy of a state comes from the people. If they by the end they consent to something, ladies and gentlemen, they might as well be justified. If they don't, which is definitely not the case in this, the surveillance, ladies and gentlemen, is not justified. Hence proving to you that Edward Snowden in what he did was justified. Secondly, was Edward Snowden exaggerated? The first speaker said that, well, not everyone's phones will be tapped, not everyone looked into. The second speaker's speech was based on the idea that you will get to know these terrorists only after getting to hear your phone calls, ladies and gentlemen, and these systems are immature. So a big contradiction there, proving to you that even Team Estonia think that these things are not exaggerated, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, the government, will it by the NRA, can it keep a secret? And we told you how exactly this is the true grave of a matter. Which brings me to my third issue is whether or not you can break contracts with agencies. If you go into a 7-Eleven and you are hired, ladies and gentlemen, and only to find out that this is actually a slaughterhouse, will you actually report it? Of course you will, because that is a too grave of a matter, and we told you that and they never refuted it. Lastly, we told you how exactly retaliation exists, and they considered how people retaliating is good enough reason for us to show you how exactly by the end of it is justified. Lastly, is this the better way to crack down on terrorists? We told you how exactly by the end of it these terrorists for 12 or 24 or how many years it may be, ladies and gentlemen, know the United States is on their heels. So do you actually think that they will be using phones, have a Facebook account, tweeting where they're bottlenecks? No, they won't, ladies and gentlemen. So what's the point of this policy in the first place? The only people you are targeting, ladies and gentlemen, are those people who you're supposed to look after in the first place. We talked about conflicts with other states which they never tackled. So, ladies and gentlemen, by the end of the day, Team Affirmative have shown you why this will be bad, why it's unjustified, and above all, ladies and gentlemen, the NSA was wrong. So, ladies and gentlemen, Edward Snowden was right. So, ladies and gentlemen, what are we trying to prove? What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve that every citizen of the United States, ladies and gentlemen, has his own privacy. Every citizen of the United States does not have to be accountable to the government, but the government be accountable to them. So, beautiful Sharon on the judging panel today, ladies and gentlemen, can go home and use her Facebook without the government knowing. Thank you.
You've got 2 minutes.
Did not bring chips.
ladies and gentlemen, the fact that the speakers of the proposition believe that their Facebook history is so important for everyone proves our point of the fact that they have fallen into the trap of actually over-exaggerating the whole problem. Their Facebook history is not as important as everyone would like them to believe. And, you know, everybody should know this. And this is exactly what we're going to be proving. If they believe that this, you know, surveillance system is so sophisticated, then how will they not actually realize that, you know, a Pakistani boy who's just calling his mother is actually just calling his mother? Their case was very contradictory. So now, when we're talking about, first of all, I'm going to tell you about privacy versus security, and second of all, we're going to analyze the debate from all of the stakeholders, such as average people, you know, the state and the NSA, and also the terrorists. So privacy versus security. They cannot tell us that we didn't tackle this point if we obviously did throughout our speeches, starting from the first speech. We see that there is a justification for actually infringing on some privacy rights in order to guarantee the security. This is exactly how our state works. This is exactly how the whole system in the whole world works, right? In order to have some rights, we take away some others. So basically, they never actually told us why is it not okay to take away those rights. So if they don't want the security, for example, right? So should we not have any surveillance systems at all? Should we not, you know, scan people in the airports? Obviously we should, because we want to feel secure and we want to feel that there is somebody looking out for us. But at the same time, we don't want to know how exactly does it work, because we know in ourselves that if we know, that means that everybody knows. That means that everybody can actually, you know, circumvent those systems in some way or another, right? So, and you know, we asked them what kind of a privacy is absolute in cross-sex, but in that case they kind of backed up, but at the same time, throughout their whole speeches, they told us how, you know, privacy is some kind of an absolute right, but at the same time, they never actually proved us. Why should it be an absolute right? Why should we not infringe on some rights, you know, such as privacy, in order to guarantee security? Now, let's look at stakeholders. Like, first of all, average people. Average people have obviously been touched by this scandal, but most of all, you know, we have a lot of teenagers standing up to the whole problem that, you know, oh my God, my Facebook history is being looked at. But the fact is that, you know, NSA is obviously not looking at average people. The honest people have nothing to be afraid of, and that is exactly the point. Even though there might be like all of the data out there, that doesn't mean that we have enough resources or even people to look at all of that data. Obviously, we don't have time for that. Obviously, we're going to have some kind of algorithms who look for people, you know, their behavior, right? Their behavior. And after that, they're going to have some reasonable doubt to actually look into that person. And, you know, second of all, what we also talked about, if that person has nothing to be afraid of, and if, you know, some phone call is, you know, listened to and they don't know about that, then we see no active harm in that, you know. The NSA did their job well. The NSA looked into it. They found out that there is no harm. And after that, we can all feel safer, right? This is exactly how our world works. In order to actually, you know, have security, we also have to infringe on some rights. Now, when we're talking about the second stakeholder, such as the state and the NSA, then if you are going to have such a big scandal about their work, about their everyday work, you know, about the Patriot Act, which has already been in action for 10 years, and we have seen no big scandals so far, right? If we're going to be actually, you know, intervening into their work, we're going to be stopping ourselves from feeling secure. We're actually making their job more difficult because everybody is turning against them, right? We do not actually trust our state to the extent that we should be trusting the state. We should know that the state has our interests at heart, and if I'm an average person, then I should know that the state is obviously not going to be looking at my Facebook history or listening to my phone calls, which my mother makes to me, right? It is obvious that, you know, this kind of a surveillance system, which they themselves said is very sophisticated, is also going to be dealing with actual threats. We're not going to be dealing with, you know, regular people. So therefore, we should have the trust in our government and also, you know, any kind of surveillance systems that they are going to be doing the right thing. And now, when we're talking about the terrorists as the final stakeholder, then, well, they told us that we are not on their heels. But we believe that this war on terror has been fought for quite some while, and quite successfully as well. They never really brought us, you know, have they told us that, you know, the USA has not caught any terrorists? No, they didn't, because obviously USA has been doing it pretty efficiently. and we should trust the state to do it efficiently and not be afraid that they're going to look at our Facebook history. So this is exactly why you should vote for Team Estonia. Thank you.
Thank you for your cooperation. Please shake your hands and please leave this room immediately. Thank you.
And person and water.
Good game.
Yardım bir dakika makarek sıkı kaya.
Вы всегда так быстро решение принимаете, как всегда часто ошибаетесь.
Thank you.